Imagine this, a president who couldn't read until he was a teenager, who was homeless as a child, and who learned his trade as a tailor, sewing clothes for a living. That man was Andrew Johnson, and his story is one of the most incredible and controversial in all of American history. Born into crushing poverty, Johnson never stepped foot in a school. He was an apprentice tailor who ran away and taught himself to read and write with the help of his wife. By day, he stitched coats and trousers. By night, he devoured books on politics and history. People were drawn to his grit, his raw ambition, and his fiery speeches against the wealthy elite. He climbed the political ladder with pure, stubborn determination, from mayor to congressman to governor, and finally to vice president of the United States. Then on April 15, 1865, everything changed. A single gunshot echoed through Ford's Theater, and Abraham Lincoln was dead. Suddenly, Andrew Johnson, the tailor from Tennessee, was the 17th president. He inherited a nation shattered by 4 years of brutal civil war. The country was on its knees, bleeding and broken, desperately needing a leader to heal its wounds and guide it toward a new future. The hopes of millions, especially the 4 million newly freed African Americans, rested on his shoulders. This was his moment to unite a fractured America, but Johnson had his own ideas. He believed the southern states, the very states that had rebelled, should be welcomed back into the Union quickly and with few consequences. He started pardoning former Confederate leaders by the thousands, allowing the same men who fought to destroy the country to regain their power. It was as if the war had barely been won. Congress was horrified. They had just fought a war to end slavery and preserve the Union. And now the president seemed intent on handing control right back to the old Southern aristocracy. This is where the real battle began, not on a field with cannons, but in the halls of Washington, D.C. Congress passed laws to protect the rights of newly freed slaves, to give them a chance at a real life to ensure their citizenship. Johnson vetoed them again and again. He vetoed the Civil Rights Act. He vetoed bills that would extend the life of the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency created to help former slaves with food, housing, and education. He declared these efforts an overreach of federal power and an attack on states' rights. His message was clear. He was in charge, and he would reconstruct the nation his way. He saw himself as a defender of the Constitution, a man of the people fighting against a radical, overzealous Congress. But to his opponents, he was a stubborn, racist autocrat, betraying the very principles the Civil War was fought over. The clash was personal, it was bitter, and it paralyzed the government. Johnson gave fiery, rambling speeches comparing himself to Jesus and accusing his opponents in Congress of treason. Congress, in return, viewed him as an obstacle to peace and justice. The situation became so toxic, so explosive, that Congress decided to take a step never before taken in American history. They decided to remove the president from office. They drew up articles of impeachment, accusing Johnson of violating a law called the Tenure of Office Act, which was specifically passed to limit his power. He had fired his Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, a man who was openly working with Congress against him. For Congress, this was the final straw. It was a direct challenge to their authority, and they responded with the most powerful weapon they had. In 1868, Andrew Johnson became the first American president to be impeached. The trial was a national spectacle. The entire country held its breath as the Senate, acting as both judge and jury, debated the president's fate. Tickets to the Senate gallery were the most sought-after items in Washington. For weeks, lawyers argued, witnesses testified, and the future of the presidency hung in the balance. Would a president be removed from office simply for political disagreements? Or had Johnson truly committed high crimes and misdemeanors? The final vote was agonizingly close. The prosecution needed a 2/3 majority to convict him. As the votes were tallied, it came down to the wire. 35 senators voted guilty. 19 senators voted not guilty. They were just one single vote short. By the slimmest possible margin, one vote, Andrew Johnson was acquitted. He kept his job, but his presidency was shattered. He had survived impeachment, but his power was gone. He served out the rest of his term as a lame duck with no political capital and no public trust. He left the White House in disgrace, forever remembered not for his incredible rise from poverty, but for the bitter conflict that nearly tore the government apart for a second time in a decade. Andrew Johnson's story is a stark reminder of how a leader's personality, their stubbornness, their biases, and their inability to compromise can shape the destiny of a nation. He was a self-made man who inherited a broken country at its most vulnerable moment. But instead of mending it, his actions left deep scars that would affect the course of American history for the next 100 years. His presidency was a tragic story of missed opportunities and bitter divisions, a chapter that shows just how fragile a nation can be. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next dive into history. See you next time.